Triathlon Show 304. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Arild Tveiten. Arild is the head coach and sports director of the Norwegian Triathlon Federation. If you followed the Olympics in Tokyo, this year we had Kristian Blummenfelt take home the gold medal in the men's individual event, and Kristian has been coached by Arild for 11 years. So we discussed with Arild the preparation and training leading into the Olympics for Kristian and for his fellow Norwegian athletes, Gustav Iden, Casper Stornes and Lotte Miller, who all finished in very respectable positions of 8th, 11th and 24th. We go into a lot of specifics regarding training and tapering and heat preparation and so on. But if you want to hear more about the general Norwegian training strategy, as we talk about a little bit or allude to in the episode, I have done a couple of episodes with Arild before, episodes 154 and 223, where we go in depth on that general training approach that they have. So do check those out, as well as the interview I did with Olav Alexander Bu. I can't remember the episode number, but I'll include the link in the show notes for that, so you can check that out as well. And that will give you a lot of information about the general training philosophy of Arild and the Norwegian team. But before we get into the interview, big thanks to our sponsors, Roka. Roka produce exceptional quality triathlon wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, performance sunglasses, as well as prescription eyeglasses and sunglasses. If you want to go faster in the water or on the bike, a Roka wetsuit or tri-suit might be for you. Or if you just want to have a more comfortable, functional and stylish pair of eyeglasses, then look to their range of eyeglasses, like the Rory eyeglasses, for example, that I use. Today, I want to highlight a Roka product that is the Roka Sim Pro 2 buoyancy shorts that you can use in the pool to simulate a wetsuit-like body position without actually wearing your wetsuit and risk overheating. A lot of people use a pool buoy, of course, to help with their body position, but using Roka's buoyancy shorts is a lot better than using a pool buoy because it still lets you kick, rotate, and turn naturally, which a pool buoy doesn't. Visit roka.com/TTS for 20% off your entire Roka order. And thank you to Zen8. The Zen8 indoor swim trainer is a swim training tool that you can use at home, allowing you to improve your technique, work on your power and stamina, and save time and stay consistent. Consistency is super important, but sometimes it is tough to find the time to get to the pool. So to have a time-efficient option for complementing your pool and open water swimming at home is invaluable, and the Zen8 swim trainer provides that. In addition, you can use it for specific purposes like doing swim, bike, brick workouts, and to work on perfect core activation and streamline with the help of the built-in instability element that the swim bench has. Also, the Zen8 swim trainer does not take up a lot of space, and it is very affordable, even more so with the 20% discount code that you can get on zen8swimtrainer.com/TTS. Now, without any further ado, let's get into the interview with Arild Tveiten. Welcome back to That Triathlon Show, Arild. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing great, and thank you for having me again. I think it's the third time I'm with you.
Yeah, it is the third time. I've talked to a couple of people already that I'm told them that I'm interviewing you, and they're all very excited to hear you again because they really enjoyed the previous interviews. So I think that's something that goes for the entire listener base. They have been really popular episodes. So let's just start by discussing the Olympics a little bit. You are coming from, tell me, are you very happy with how the Olympics went overall for you as a team?
Of course, we are really happy when we get a gold medal, because that is something we have been working hard for to try to achieve since I started my position and working also with Kristian 11 years ago. So, of course, we are really happy with that. But in a retro perspective, when we I know going some weeks after the Olympics, we are focused much more on the athletes who maybe not achieved their goals, because in the Olympics you have most athletes actually don't succeed and are of course very disappointed. And now of course you are really, really happy for the gold medal, really happy for Kristian, and he deserved it. But now you're paying more attention to the boys and of course Lotte at least, who didn't achieve the dream. So yeah, but in overall we are happy, but now it's more thinking about what could been done differently or better with the other athletes.
Yeah, I was just looking at the world rankings, and still all of your team members beat their world ranking. But I know that, of course, the goal was different. But for example, Gustav was 6th, and his world ranking was, I think, 10th or something. And Casper was 11th with a world ranking of I can't remember, but lower than 11.
Yeah. Okay. Based on that and the team effort, with Gustav was 8th and Casper was 11 is of course really good. But we know that they didn't have their best day ever, and of course they want to have that. But they did good races. They were up there quite a long time. They were a big factor in the race. They were almost at the front when after the bike and started to run. So yeah, we were the major factor and the big players on the men's field. So that is good. For the women's team, it was really bad for Lotte that we were not able to get her in the swimming shape that she wanted to do. And she was also a little bit bad placed on the pontoon because of the weather conditions. Is that part of the pontoon she placed herself was not a good position based on the weather, it was that day, because it was really bad weather at night and in the morning. So she in many ways didn't have the swimming was not good, and then we are struggled quite way off on the front, and it's difficult to come back again. And you also see on the women's races was a lot of big difference that you have seen it in a girls race earlier, but this time it was even bigger than normal.
Yeah. Well, you said that you have been working for this gold medal for 11 years since you started working with Kristian. So in a way that all of those 11 years have been leading up to this moment. But when would you say that you started to prepare really specifically for Tokyo? Was there anything that changed at some point when you got really 100% focused on the games and nothing else?
Yes, of course. In many ways, I could say that after the Rio Olympics, we say just the day after that, okay, we just need to start working for the next Olympics, and we were really motivated for that. So the process started there. But when we are in details, you know that the Tokyo Olympics was, we knew quite early that it was a little bit different, because we knew heat would be a factor. And the first time we started doing preparation for the heat and tried to look into the data to prepare for that condition, that was, I would say that, let's say that it started with the first heat camp we had in Thailand in the beginning of 2018. So we were there 2.5 years before the race was supposed to happen. But in the end, we had a little bit more time. But from that time, all we did in most training camp had a focus on what we also needed to do to perform in the Olympics, especially based on heat preparation, heat camps. So we, in many ways, had a period of heat training and training where we stretch your body at the heat. From that time, and we did that all year round.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And during this year of 2021, what we saw early in the year or during spring, when the WTCS series started in Yokohama, and Kristian was on great form in a lot of the early races, WTCS and World Cup races, and and then he raced a lot, many weeks consecutively, and then there was a period when he and most of the other Norwegians, I think, did not race. So you were training and preparing for the games. Can you discuss a little bit around that periodization of how you distributed this year between race periods and training periods?
Yeah, in overall, when we started 2021, it was still challenging, and still is a challenging year compared to the Corona situation. So some of the things were changing during the year, but we actually said when we are going to the first major training camp in January in Portugal, in Rio Maior, that it is a big chance that the athletes will not be able to get home before the Olympics. So we had actually a really good block of training there. That was, of course, at sea level, and of course it was not so hot there. So most of the athletes were there for 6 weeks. Some were there for 9 weeks, and then we go into the altitude block before the first big race, Yokohama. We have the whole year round planned that we will have an intense racing block of the 4 weeks of racing, starting from Yokohama, ending in Leeds. We discussed it. Was it too much? Was it too much traveling or between the races? But we actually found out that it has been so little racing the last year that all race experience would be good for athletes. Yeah, in the end, it turned out that not everyone did everything, but in the end, but Kristian did all 4 races, 5 including the mixed relay qualification, and we were quite certain that based on the training base and from we had in the winter, it would be no problem to have 4 weeks back to back of racing. Because we also knew that when that was finished, we would have really good training block leading up to Olympics again. And if you also see that in a bigger perspective, that the challenging with the racing block was actually that you have 2 Olympic distance 6 days apart, and you need to cross 8 time zones from Japan to Lisbon within short time. So that was the big challenge. After the Lisbon races, we actually went straight to Italy to Asacena race, and there we actually had the time to be there we were there 10 days, and we did, in a simple way, 10 days training camp with 1 sprint race. If you put it into that perspective, we also get a really good possibility to do some good training there. And then we, of course, had the Leeds race after that. But if you say, look at Kristian's result, he started out strong with the victory in Yokohama. In Lisbon, he was more tired, and he didn't have quite the same legs that he had in Yokohama. That was not surprisingly because of the long traveling and the time zone difference. But he was still the athlete who maybe did best in the 2 races overall in total. Some of the big players in the Lisbon race didn't race in Yokohama and vice versa. But then afterwards, when he went to Italy, he was not sick, but he was having kind of a little bit infection, so he was not 100%. He could train and he raced, but he didn't have the last finishing touch. So he was actually a little bit tired on the run and didn't have this leg speed to have the fantastic race. But that was better when he going into the Leeds. And in Leeds, in many ways, he had a quite okay race, but still he had a little bit trouble with on the run, that he wasn't so fresh that he normally was. But we were not specific stressed about it because we knew why, and he was still able to get into good training, and we knew his overall fitness was really good. So from outside, it could look like that he peaked too early and he then get more and more tired, and it will be difficult for him to get into the real fitness for Olympics. But for us, we knew how it was, and we saw all the data, and so we were not concerned at all. And as I said, that for us, when we started the season, to have these 4 weeks of racing back-to-back was a good part of the plan. But I see that most athletes maybe think it was too much, because in the end it's still 3 Olympic distance races in 4 weeks, and not everyone can do that. But Kristian is one of the ones who can do that with quite success. And okay, Leeds was not the perfect race, but he was 6th overall, and he hadn't raced, or maybe he had been top 10, he wouldn't have won the grand final, the World Series in total. So of course all races matter.
Yeah.
And and of course you see in the end he ended up with the 3 win in the World Series and won 6th position, so that was good enough for the win.
Yeah. When you plan this racing block, what are the main objectives of it? Is it that the racing gets athletes used to the really specific things around racing, like, well, transitions, the race dynamics, and also just the mental aspect of racing? Or do you also consider it as just physiologically and physically a different type of training that you can't really replicate other than by actually racing? Is it more race specific, or is it equally physical and physiological?
I think it's both, and it's an aspect of everything. Okay, if you want to, you can replicate most of the things in training, what you do in races, but what you don't can replicate is how the race scenarios, how the way the field is working on the bike, on the swim, and all these kind of things. That is a dynamic things that is changing from time to time. And the more you race, the more you learn how each competitors are racing in that situation, and that is a part of it that's really important. We also think that Yokohama race, mainly with the quite technical, it's not very technical, but you have a lot of the corners and 90 degrees, 180 degrees, where it's really race specific. And that is something is really challenging to replicate in training. Even, I maybe tell it later, but we did that before in the pre-camp leading up to the Olympic race. But so you need both. As I said, many times we said, okay, we can just train and prepare for the races with training, but you need to know that last year it was little training overall. So many of the athletes just did 2-3 races, and normally they will do maybe at least 10 in one season. So just to have the feeling of doing a race again. And when Kristian won in Yokohama, the last time he raced Olympic distance at that level was in the grand final in Lausanne in 2019. So of course it's a long time. This is 1.5 years. So for us it was really important to also have the races, because if you don't have that, you don't have the feeling of how am I compared to the competitors. Because when we were racing in Yokohama, as I said, it was 1.5 years since anyone at the highest level in the world did an Olympic race together. So a lot of things can happen in that period. Some new athletes will develop, some will maybe not develop, and you need to do there and be there to learn how the athletes are racing in 2021.
Yep. And then after that Leeds race in June, you went back into a big block of training. Can you talk a little bit more about what you did between Leeds and the races in the Olympics?
Yeah, of course, that was the main block of preparation for the Olympics. So we went straight from Leeds to Barcelona. We actually spent 3 days there at sea level. We did a lot of testing at the velodrome. Then we did some of the heat testing. We did some more testing about the racing suit, some of the things compared to aerodynamic on the triathlon bars and stuff like that. So we did that and finalized everything, all the data we needed. And then we went to Font-Romeu in the French Pyrenees. And we were there almost 5 weeks. It was 4.5 weeks. And then we went over to Japan, just exactly 2 weeks before the Olympic race for the men's. And we spent the first 9 days at the pre-camp there at the heat in Miyazaki. And then we went to the Olympic Village. That was, in general, the overall training block. And that was also a good block with no distraction and no stress and just a lot of good training.
Yeah. Was it any different than your normal training that you do at other training camps, or was it pretty much similar to what you usually do?
Actually, it is quite similar. It's quite exactly what we did in 2019 before we did the test event in Tokyo. We also spent the summer in 2020 in Formö, and we did much of the same thing. In general, I would say that we strongly believe in the way we train and how we should develop ourselves as athletes. And it's not that we are trying to do something new or find some new methods or new ideas. So it's quite kind of conservative training on camps, what we know that works. And I think one of the mistakes a lot of athletes are doing leading up to the Olympics is that you want to do something more. Is very often when I listen to athletes and when they talk about their training, they try to do a little bit more, and it's more race specific, more higher intensity stuff. And that is what I would say that some of the common mistakes, they want to do the little bit extra because it's the biggest race in a 4-year cyclist. And when it comes to the race, many of the athletes are actually not in the best fitness or in their life because they have not done the training they should have done. And for us, it's more like, okay, we know what works. You still need a lot of volume. You still need to work on your aerobic pace. You still need to work on a threshold. And the race-specific training is, in general, very little compared to the overall basic principles of training. And you also know that for Formö is at altitude is not very high, it's 1,800 meters. So but you still need to pay a little bit attention to the intensity control, how hard you go on the training. It's not like we are going down and running a lot of thousands in low 240s and say that, oh, we are in fitness of our life, we are running so fast. It's more like you are racing at the intensity and pace you know that you need to be a top contender in the Olympics. And no one is running 240Ks 10 in a row in the Olympics. So it's not like, and so for us, it's like, it's the basic stuff. But of course, we probably want to talk about it a little bit later. And that is also the time where we started doing heat preparation, because we do heat preparation before we travel over to Japan, so we are a little bit prepared to heat when we come there.
Yeah.
But in general, it's not any big secret or any special things we do. It's just the basic process, believe in it and do it well. That's the thing. And just to summarize it, in many ways, we probably train 5% less this year than we did last year, for instance. Then we are sure. It's not like we're doing the little bit extra. We just take it down a little bit. Then we are a little bit more fresh for most of the training session. And number of training sessions you can do with the intensity and the quality that you need it is a little bit better and a little bit higher. Yeah.
And for listeners that haven't heard your previous interviews, I just want to say that we talked a lot about just your normal training process in those 2 interviews. So you can just go and look them up and get more details around that. One question about the altitude. So you went to Fontremé. You also do a lot of altitude camps in Sierra Nevada. Is there a reason that you chose Fontremé for that pre-Olympic camp, or when do you prefer one or the other?
I would say that in general, we normally plan our year around that we go to high altitude in Sierra Nevada in the spring. So this year, most of April, we were in Sierra Nevada. That is 2,300 meters above sea level. So there, the stress for the body is higher than in Forumø, which is 1,800. And then in the summertime, we went to Forumø. So we have actually been in Forumø every year since 2014. So it's a place we know. We know the roads, we know the pools. We have really nice chalets we are staying at, and some of the chalets we have been staying in the last 5-6 years. So it's almost like going back home. So it's very safe. And then normally in the normal year, we in October, November, we'll go to Sierra Nevada again. It's a little bit higher, but higher altitude is really good to work on, develop the aerobic fitness and rise your threshold. A little bit lower, like Forumø, especially when you are used to that altitude, means that you can do more race-specific training. So in summertime, we find that easier and better. And also, if you take a normal year, where we have a lot of Europe races in June, July, August, Forumø has been our home base for, let's say, up to 2 months in the summertime. And then you just travel to the races and come back again. And that is one of the few places at altitude you can do that. I know that some people going to San Moritz or stuff like that, but for us, Forumø is perfect.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And we'll definitely come back to the heat preparation that you mentioned there. But before that, just generally about the taper period. So, well, let's call it the 2 weeks that you were in Japan leading up to the race. Can you talk more specifics around how you planned the tapering period?
Yeah, I can do that. In many ways, I would say, okay, yes, we have a tapering period. Yes, we prepare for the races, but I would say that in general, to perform at the race is all year round training you do. That is the big factor. And on when you start to do the tapering period, it's still a balance between the basic training and the more race-specific training. So we were lucky that we were able to go to Miyazaki. We were there together with the Japanese national males team for Olympics. So we have someone who we can train together with. Almost at the same place, actually, was the Great Britain's team. So we jump into both Alex G and Johnny Brownlee almost on daily basis, but we never trained together, but we were in the same place. But in general, it's a good place for training. You have the heat that you wanted to train in the heat and prepare the last thing for the Olympics. In the end, we had a few days with really bad weather, with a lot of rain, thunderstorm. So we actually did a little bit more of the training indoor to actually get the heat that we wanted. But in general, when we have that period, what it's about is you do more race-specific training, of course. So I will not go into the details on every session, but we had maybe 3 or 4 open water sessions with the Japanese team. There were 3 men, and we were 4 athletes, and we were racing together, small loops. Sometimes we also work on the transitions there. We got a really good help of the Japanese local government to set up racks for bikes, transition and stuff like that. So that is something we practice. We started together. We started to race simulated, and of course at the race intensity. Place yourself in the field. The Japanese athletes have at least 2 really good swimmers who's normally at the front group swimmers, so that helps us a lot. On top of that, we had the race-specific training we do for bike run is more kind of normal brick session, And again, we were really lucky with help from the local government that they put up. We designed a really technical loop on the bike. Maybe it's 1.5k with a lot of corners and acceleration point. We need to brake, accelerate, turns, and work on the turns in both directions. And they closed the road, so you cannot worry about the traffic. They had guards there. We have cones. We have everything. And then we did, of course, the bike and run bricks, a lot of that. And that is, it's not that it's a game changer, but that was some of the big sessions that made a difference and things you don't do in the all year round normally. That was really race specific, and also at the race specific intensity. So,
do you think that was quite unique to what you and the Japanese managed to do, or do you think many of the other groups and federations managed to set up that sort of really specific race course to practice on?
I know that most teams try to do it, but I think it was quite different compared to where you were allowed to train, because some national teams had really difficulty even having a pre-camp in Japan because it was mostly closed down. And some of the teams who had the pre-camp in Japan needed to do most of the training indoor or at a very close circuit. So I think the possibilities for some of the team was a little bit different. So we were, I would say we were lucky. I know that the Great Britain team had the same possibility. They did more. They don't do exactly the same training, but they have the same possibilities to do the same. Yeah, but for us, it was an advantage. But in general, I would say that that's a kind of training I think that all teams want to do before an important race.
Yeah. What about the volume in that period? Did it go down a bit, or a lot, or not so much at all compared to your normal training volume?
It went down a little bit. I'm just looking at the data now, and it got down a little bit. How much? Maybe the first week, maybe 15%. But then actually most of the volume that goes down is that you spend 1.5 days of traveling. So it's wrong to say that we say that traveling is resting days, but that's a time where you don't clock the hours in training. So you lose some volume there. And of course, after long traveling, you need to take it a little bit easy the first days before you can do some good session. So I would say that the first week maybe going down 15% from what we did the last whole week at altitude, and then the next week we'd go down a little bit more, but it not so much. Our athletes at this level now is like, if they go down too much, they get lazy and sluggish. They don't feel so fresh. So we still need to do some of the volume. But of course, you don't do 90 minutes run. You don't do 3-4 hours bikes and 6Ks in the pool. So it's very specific in what you need to do, because that is not the time where you should. If you come to a tapering period and think you need aerobic fitness, then you are in trouble, because then you are started too late. So It's not the time to have I need the last 3-hour bike ride because I don't have the fitness I wanted to be on the bike. It's too late to start that. You need to know that you have done the right work before you come to tapering period. But as I said, to conclude, it's a very specific race intensity, and you need to keep up a decent volume. So for us, it's not very much, but let's say that between 20-25 hours a week, when a lot of resting and also high intensity race specific workouts, that is still a quite high volume.
Yeah. And now let's discuss the heat preparation, which will be really interesting to hear. So can you just give a general summary? And this is not necessarily specific to the taper, but anything you can tell about how you approached that from all the way from the first heat camp that you had in Thailand?
Yes, I of course will do some general principles. We also saw some of the things that we think maybe that is I would not say secret, but some of the things that we discovered with our athletes. But in general, one of the things that we have done a lot since we started in 2018 is to have a lot of measure on the core temperature during workouts and also on race-specific workouts. So every athlete have learned how the body reacts to heat and heat stress. And based on that, you get an experience on how you can control that. Of course, you can do some little bit cooling on the sessions, but it's mostly how you control the intensity in some of the key sessions to keep the core temperature at the control level. And we saw some big difference compared to, let's say that on the bike, it's quite easy to control the core temperature, but if you're still pushing too hard, it will rise. On the run, it's just rise and goes rocket high. And so there you need to know how to react on that. How can you try to tolerate the high heat stress or high core temperature your body will get, or how much should you need to cool it down, and with what kind of equipment should you use as a cooling stuff. So that is some of the things that we looked into, and it's a little bit different from athletes to athletes. But we were very focused on learning the athletes or the athlete's body how to react to the heat, to get used to it, and also get used to race and train hard in the heat. So, for instance, when you're having race-specific workouts, it's you need to have it on the day, part of the days when you actually have the heat exposure. So even the race was in the morning. It was not like we take all the session early in the morning. No, we were taking some of the sessions at the time of the day when the heat was the highest possible. But that is, it's not any big secret that I think everyone tried to do that. One of the things I think we did indifferently that we collecting a lot of data because we were investing quite a lot in kind of core body temperature pills. We also had some, I can't remember, some sensor we had on the body to measure stress, heat stress, heat flux. And based on that, we get a really good data, and the athletes get a really good data on how they should relate to the heat and how much heat can they tolerate and when do they need to slow down. So the last year especially, because of the evolution of this kind of equipment has increased a lot during the year. So in the beginning, the first time you have a pill, you need to take it up in your back, and then you need to download the data afterwards. But the last year, we also have instant feedback on core body temperature. So actually, when you train, and you train at a certain intensity, at that temperature, you will know you can have it for race day. You actually saw how the core body temperature was increasing or decreasing on live, and that is one of the things that we paid a lot of attention to. But in the end, it was not any big secret. It's not using tools that the other competitors didn't have. Everything was available on the market, so we were just buying that on the market as everyone else could do. But maybe it was a little bit more systematic in how we used the data.
So with the device that you're talking about, I assume it's the one called Core, which measures. Yeah,
it's Core. I can't remember the name, and that is measuring heat flux. And when you're using that also with a pill, like the e-body pill, and you can look at and compare the data. You can actually see how the core sensor is actually how that correlate to the accurate core body temperature measured inside your body. And then you get correlation. Yeah.
And is that a good correlation? And also, is it a correlation, or is it like absolutely sort of, is it accurate as well as precise?
It's both accurate and precise. The last version we were using was really good, actually.
Yeah. That's really good to hear. And so then when using that sort of tool in training, what would be a couple of example use cases for it? Would you, for example, in some sessions where you specifically try to drive up the core temperature and then stay at a certain temperature for a certain time when you wanted to have heat stress, or would you, in other cases, maybe try to find okay, at what pace can I sustain myself without going to a critical level? Can you just give a couple of examples of how you were using that data?
Yeah, we were actually using in the both example you are using some of this training you do in the heat is actually to see how much can you raise the core body the temperature and not fall apart or not put your body into a stress that is actually dangerous. So that is one kind of things that you are stressing that we especially doing indoor in a heat chamber. And the other part is try to find the right intensity you can stay at to keep the core body temperature at the level that you can tolerate the whole race. So it's we're using in both ways, and we also see that try to see the correlation between the bike and the run. We saw that the effort you put on the bike can quite affect how fast your core body temperature is rising during the run. And if it's rising too much, too high, the only way you can tolerate that normally is that you slow down the pace. And in the end, if you want to perform at the highest level, like in the Olympics, that is something you don't want to do. So it's try to find the right balance, both on the bike and run. A little bit general there, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And when it comes to the heat stress training that you did, or the heat stress period that you did, how much of it would you say, or just in general terms, was most of it done while training and partially in a heat chamber or just in a room with a thermostat, and partially outdoors in hot climates like in Japan? And did you do some that was just like saunas or hot baths or something, or was it all training related?
If it's more or less training related, that means that we were even in a heat chamber, or if we didn't have a heat chamber, we will just make one ourselves. So let's say that in normal last year, the athletes have training blocks of heat training back home, staying in the bathroom, put on the heater at the maximum temperature, and if that's not hot enough, you put in on extra clothes. When we're on training camp in Vormö, we were able to use a heat chamber, and also in Miyazaki, but it need to be manually heated. So it's not a heat chamber in the way that, for instance, in Norway, we have built a heat chamber that we are supposed to use as a preparation for the Olympics. And that was a big investment for the Norwegian Olympic Committee, but we actually didn't use it. I think we were in there one or twice for testing, but the rest of the time we did the similar things when we are at training camp. And you can do a lot with extra clothes and heat up the room you are staying at. But one big thing is that we try not to have too much heat stress on the things you do except training, because that is something that is really stressing the body, especially in terms of recovery. So if you try to be the genius that you take off the air condition at the hotels to have a highest possible temperature, so you are used to the heat, you probably sleep. The sleep quality will be bad. Your recovery will get worse, and then you don't win on it. It's in total you actually lose on it. And we also think in general terms that if you are staying too long and doing too much heat training, that also will affect your training. So we try to find the balance between all that. And then we have one expert that is doing more research on now. That is how altitude training and also heat training in terms of production of blood plasma interact with each other. And that is something that it's getting more research on now. Actually, some of the more serious research on that topic is done in Norway. So we also been working a little bit with these scientists in Norway based on that. Because we also want to see the heat training not just as a heat preparation for the Olympics and racing in hot condition, but also as a way to develop the blood plasma for athletes.
Yeah. And one more question on the heat adaptation is, so how did you structure it? So you had certain periods when you were on like training camps in hot conditions, like in Thailand or in Japan leading up to the games. Between that and before the games, were you always trying to maintain? So do a little bit of like every week, do a couple of sessions to maintain when you were not in a hot place, but still maintain that all the time? Or would you leave it completely and then have some periods when you worked more on it? And specifically leading up to the Olympics, how often would you do a heat session?
We have done it a little bit differently. We have tried certain different things about that. This year, we actually did most of the heat training at a certain time when we were at the altitude in Font-Romeu, and we found out how many weeks we needed to get the maximum blood plasma response. And also, so this year we did it mostly at, as I said, in the last, let's say, 2.5 weeks at the altitude camp, and of course in the pre-camp in Miyazaki. But earlier years, we also been doing that. Last year, when we were not able to travel so much, and we were not able to go to altitude camp, we also had blocks of heat training leading up to some of the few races we did to try to have a blood plasma response, because you couldn't get the training response from training at altitude. So we are just working a little bit of the blood plasma. So it's been a little bit different. But this year, since we could travel, we can do the heat altitude training and everything. We thought and knew, based on the experience we had, that we didn't need to do it all year round. So we started seriously when we were in Font-Romeu.
Yeah. And then how often are we talking about that you would do? Was it almost every day or every other day?
Yeah, almost every day. Not so long, but 1 to 2 hours, let's say 6 days a week.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Then a question about the race. So the swim is, of course, always really critical. And that has been something that for all of the Norwegian athletes has been just like a critical part, like in some races in the past, especially when the swim hasn't been good, like you have just had too much ground to make up for it to be possible to win. So I imagine that you put a lot of effort and thought into how to minimize the gap out of the water and be in a good position to reach the front pack, or be close enough anyway to be within striking distance of it. Can you talk a little bit about how you approached the swim in terms of tactics and training?
Oh yeah. You know that, and you pointed out that the swimming has not been the strongest point for the Norwegians, and sometimes it could be challenging for us to get up to the front group. But I would say that the last year we are quite, especially Kristian and also Casper, is quite close to the front, between 20 to 30 seconds. But we see that the way, especially Kristian is made, he's not a fast swimmer. He's really a slow starter. There's no way that he can have the start speed that he's able to follow the leaders the first 200 meters on the swim. So for him, it's more like to try to minimize the distance up to them. So his aerobic capacity is really good, and he's a really good fighter on the swim too. And he's more or less, if he is 20 seconds out of the water after the first man, that 20 seconds he's losing the first 200 to 300 meters, and the rest of the time he's actually swimming at the same pace. So of course you try to make the start a little bit faster and work specific on that, and then we also try to work more specific on the race intensity, that his pace at the pace he can keep at the distance is better and higher than it was before. So we restructured the training quite a lot on the swimming the last year. One thing is you do more race specific session. We also been very into that we do what you need to do and don't do too much else. So when someone is swimming our program, is just very straight to the point of what you should develop at this session. Should be LT1, should it be a sprint session, should be a L threshold session, and threshold LT2, or VO2 max session, or maybe a race pace. So it's just warm up. We did a standardized warm up based on what kind of session you are going to do. Of course, if you don't want to do a VO2 max session, you have a little bit longer and different warm-up time compared to if you want to do a aerobic threshold LT1 session, because then you don't need any warm-up at all. You can almost go straight into it. So that was something we did standard and more standardize the program to what we were going to work on, and we had a really clear plan on that. It's not any big secret, but it's a mix of develop the speed, establish a higher aerobic threshold, so you are able to keep a higher pace, and work on the race specific sessions. So one of the things we do, and it's not secret, it's not any specific, that we also standardize some of the build up to the races, how kind of race specific session, how should that be? How should the training load be on each, and try to find a balance there. So in many ways, I think that we managed that quite well. But in swimming, we see that the athletes have a little bit different body types, and they are react a little bit different to different kind of training. So some of the coaching aspect of this, of course, of all training, is the individualization, to see that all or four athletes in the Olympics need a little bit different stimuli on the swim, and try to find the optimum balance on that one. That is something we have been spending a lot of time on, and try and think we have developed that a little bit more than we have the previous year.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about that, how the different body types might affect how you react to swimming, like in what way specifically? If you are very general, we say that the triathletes normally have a little bit more of type 2 or faster muscle fiber in the upper body than the lower body. So in many ways, they need to balance that in training. But we see that some of our athletes are naturally quite fast and have no problem to have a good high speed, but they have, for instance, we can see that the Vela Max is very high, and we see that if that is too high on the athletes, because they have maybe too much type 2 fibers, they have done too much high intensity work, we need to try to train that down a little bit. Of course, in swimming, you need a little bit higher Vela Max than in running, for instance, but if it's too high, you start using a lot of glycogen that could
it will punish you quite hardly at the end of the run. So if you see it in a bigger perspective, you need to individualize their swim training so everyone is able to finish the last 3K of the running at the maximum pace. And if you are working too much on the aerobic stuff, didn't pay attention to the Vela Max, you will have athletes who are really struggling and in the end of the races. And that is some of the key things that is very, I would say, not so common to think so much that how you create swimming program actually can affect how you are able to finish the last part of the race. And that is a little bit new kind of perspective. But on the other hand, if you train too much and taking down the Vela Max too much, then you get too slow and you don't have any chance at all at the start of the race. At all the boys where you have all the acceleration because it's crowded, you stop up and then you need to accelerate again. So that is, of course, a balance you need to find. And that balance is different when you have short course race athletes compared to longer course athletes. Then it's easier.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Do you also find that if triathletes tend to have a bit higher proportion of type 2 fibers in the upper body, that with swimming you might have to be more careful just for the sake of recovery from session to session, that if you do too much intense work, type 2 fibers need longer to recover? Is that something that you consider?
Yes, of course, we take a look at that and consider that. And so we try to, that is one of the part of individualization that we are pay attention to, especially on the recovery base. But in general, I would say that swimming is still the disciplines that needs less intensity. Shortest recovery time. Sorry, that was, but it's a little bit different compared to the body types on the athletes. But in general, most athletes and triathletes can do more and more intense workouts on the swim. But it's as I probably has said earlier, that it's not that you more intensity, you harder workout, you more focus on the VO2 max, you faster you swim. Because maybe on the short term you will do, but that is not the optimized things to do if you want to have the best run of your life in a triathlon. So it's always a balance.
Yeah. And for the bike, the course in the Olympics, we already talked quite a bit about all the quarters and how you prepared for that at your pre-camp. Is that something that you prepared for a lot even before going to pre-camp, with specifically accelerations and sprinting out of corners? Or is that something you think you really built up in those last 2 weeks, and that is something that you can build up in a short time and you didn't need a lot of preparation other than that?
It's two aspects. In general, I would say that you don't need so long time to build up that to tolerate that. And we are working much more on the higher aerobic base you have, you will tolerate all this kind of acceleration. So for us, it's about beginning in the right way and not on the opposite way. So that is the foundation. And of course, we know that during the year, many of the easy session on the bike, long sessions, we do a little bit of short sprinting, acceleration, just to keep up the momentum and get used to it. But the race-specific workouts you need to prepare for a race is not so much, actually. The way we did it, the race-specific workouts we did Miyazaki, we did 3 or 4 of that. That was almost enough, but we did a few of them before we at altitude. But that is more or less like you're working at, let's say, at altitude intensity, and then you put in some acceleration between that effort, so it's not doing the same all the time. But of course, the thing that many triathletes haven't developed so much is the technical skills. You need to be technically good enough, because if you don't have the technical skill to work on the technical course, you will always brake too early or too late, and you're taking the corners not the optimized way, so you're using more energy on that. So the technical aspect of it, that need to be trained. When you have that things that you don't losing time to the others in every technical part of the course, then you don't need to do so much of it. But before you have that, it's you need to work and develop the technical skills, because that is one of the things that's a big difference between the best technical athletes and not. And I think on the male side, it's getting quite well. A lot of the athletes are technical quite well. The women's side is much bigger difference.
Yeah, no, that's what it looks like in the races for sure. And I guess that as a sort of general advice for listeners, like every time you're out on your bike, for example, when you get to a corner, try to just not lazy your way through the corner, but actually approach it with like, okay, this is a good opportunity to practice how to corner quickly, and with braking at the right timing and so on. So you don't have to necessarily do a specific training for that, but you of course that helps as well. But a lot of it can be developed through your regular training.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And in every training session, you should pay attention to that. It's very easy to do. And if you also are training together in a group, just try to stay behind the best technical guy and see how they attack the corners. You will learn a lot of that. Just follow the wheels. Don't lose it.
Yeah. Then, as a general question about the Olympics and the athletes that were successful, do you think there are any common denominators that was pretty general across all athletes that had the race they wanted or had a successful race, or do you think it really was quite different? Because in some ways, I think, like for example, we talked about the racing, and somebody like Flora, who won the women's race, didn't race that much, and Hayden Wilde, who took the bronze, didn't race that much. So some things were clearly different, even though athletes were both successful. But were there some things you think that were common denominators?
I'm not sure what to say. You have mentioned some of the athletes who didn't race too much, but you also know that Gomez didn't race too much. Mola, we didn't see so much on the racing scene before the Olympics. I think you have both things. We know that Hayden Wilde had trouble getting out of the country, so he need to limit his traveling and also racing. But I would say that in the end, the athletes who take the medals was of course no big surprise. It was what you could expect it, but it were some athletes you thought should be up there in the mix fighting for a podium who wasn't there. So, and it was some athletes, some countries that actually that didn't succeed. I'll not mention any specific names. I think they are really rare, know it themselves, but that was a little bit different in what we expected. We thought that some of the other countries and athletes should be higher up there, and I will not say that they didn't prepare well or not, but I think you come back to the thing. I think I mentioned it earlier that some athletes, they just want to do the little bit extra because it's an Olympic.
Yeah.
And then they, because there's been a little bit period of racing for all athletes, that they stop trusting in themselves, that don't trust in the process, and then just want to do the little bit extra. And I think that is one general comment I would say, that for athletes who didn't succeed as they hoped to do, they probably want to do the little bit extra.
Yeah, that is a good answer. I think there's probably a lot of truth in that. And when we return to your team, to the Norwegians, can you list 1 to 3 things that you think you all did really well in preparing for and at the games, things that worked really well, and that you're pleased with, and then 1 to 3 things that you think you can improve for the next games?
Oh, I think it's very difficult to say it exactly, but okay, we know that the heat preparation was really good. No one had problems with the heat. It was actually not so hot there, so that was a good one. We think the training balance was really good. We see that a few exceptions. We have actually no injury, no interruption in our daily training. The continuous training process the last year, and especially since January, have been really fantastic. That is two things that's really is important. And I also think that our training planning and how we build up the training, how we work on the daily basis, on the work on the altitude camps has been really good. So this is mainly the 3 factors that has been really good. But it's also always some details that you're not 100%. Of course, in the end, it's, I said that we have no injuries. We maybe train a little bit less than we normally do. So most were fresh for the sessions. But it's still like, I think that some of the things that we need to still be better to balance is try to be better at the individualization. We saw that in the training camp leading up to the Olympics, both Gustav, Casper, Kristian responded a little bit different to training. And we saw that Gustav was not in the shape that we wanted him to be early part of the altitude camp. And it's some of the small details, and it's more or less based on individualization, have enough time to be with athletes, talk to athletes, because what was special this year is always has been there. We have really focused on the Olympics, and that was the main goal, but that put a lot of attention from the coaches to what to do everything right. And when you try to optimize everything for every athlete, you actually see that sometimes you are short of time. And we have been me and our scientist Olav Alexanders, who's been with the athletes all the time on camps, and we see that we should have been more. We didn't have the time to do it 110% in every aspect of it. That is the main learning, and that is the part that we always want to improve.
And now going forward, what are your next big goals? And is that already Paris, or do you have some things before that you're really looking forward to as big things on the horizon?
From the national team perspective, it's building up to Paris. It's building up a strong women's team. So will be in the mix for the mixed relay. That is really the big goal for me as a sport director and the coach, that we want to be a factor in mixed relay. We want to have women who's fighting for the podium in Olympics. We are very sure about the boys. Of course, we need to still work on developing them. So that is what me as a sport director from the Norwegian Federation say that is our main goal. But we know that the next year and the rest of this season is a part of the season where some of the athletes, especially the men's, they are more like free to do whatever they want. So they are targeting different goals, and we support them in that, and we want to help them to achieve their goals on that one. It's in 2 weeks' time we have the 70.3 World Championship, and not to be arrogant, but I more or less expect both Kristian and Gustav to be on the podium, and we know they will do the Ironman Hawaii. They will mostly do another Ironman for preparation leading up to that. We know that Kristian also working for the Sub 7 project. So it's a lot of things going on for them as an athlete. and we want to help them to achieve their goals. But as a team, it's really important that we start focusing on the Paris Games.
Yeah. Is there anything specific you're doing to get that mixed relay team more competitive, to get more girls into the sport, or work with the ones that you have? Are there any things that you can do there specifically?
Right now is more to work with the women we have. We don't have so many. So that is one of the things with the Norwegian teams, that we don't have so many to choose from. So we have actually 3 girls right now. We have some others coming up, but they will come. It will be a little bit short time for them to develop to Paris, especially since they also need to have an individual Olympic ranking, and the Olympic qualification period start next year. So we are short of time on that. So what we are good at is to work on the athletes we have and try to get the best out of them. It's not that in many countries that if you don't see the development on that, we just find someone else, keep them out and find someone else, because in this case, we don't have any other than the 3 to choose from. So we need to work on them. We want to work on them in a way that we get out their potential, of course, and we must create the training environment that they really enjoy doing the sport. So they will be in the sport until the Paris Olympics, at least. Right now, it's not a problem, but at the high performance sport is a lot of normal days and gray days and days that everything is not working so well. So you need to have a team and a group environment that people are staying in through the tough times when everything is not so easy. It's no problem to have Kristian to be motivated after he won the Olympic gold medal, but it will be days the next year that will be quite tough for him and for the woman and everyone. So, but the better environment you have, more better attention you pay to them, the more you work with them, it's a higher chance that you will have them to stay in the sport for a long time. And that is one of my main goals. I know that if you are able to keep them motivated to do the work, we are able to develop the athletes we have, including the 3 women, to be world class. Just patient, take the time, and do the work.
That makes absolute sense. And triathlon and endurance sports is like that you can have periods when you're developing, but then you have periods when you're even regressing, and it's not linear. So you have to have an environment where you can still keep motivated even when you have that period that it's not going so well on an individual level as well. I imagine is part of it, because it's easy when you're training 30 hours per week, and it's really tough work to give up if you feel that, I'm never going to reach that level. But if you just stick with it for 2 more years, maybe you have a couple of breakthrough periods, and then suddenly you are among the best in the world. So I think that makes total sense. And you mentioned the 7.3 words and Kona. So we have talked a little bit about this before, but just as maybe a general overview, how do you change the training focus for those athletes that choose to do long distance races now as their next goals?
We are going into a new world now. Changing the athletes to race 17.3 is something we know they can do very fast. The transition is very quick. It's no big difference in how we normally train. But of course, you need to work a little bit more specific on the race pace, intensity, especially on the bike. You, of course, use the time trial bikes. It's more about keeping the even pace. At the highest level in the front group with a 17.3 and also Ironman is more cat and mouse games now than it used to be, but it's not the same as an Olympic distance race. It's totally different world. So it's more like try to dial in the intensity. You need to have some long runs, but in the end, the run you need to do, our guys are running 110 Ks a week. It's no big deal for them to run half marathon for St. George. So that we are not afraid of. For St. George, we of course do a little bit more specific workout on the hills, because it's not that flat, fast course. It's a little bit more hilly, so you work a little bit more specific on that. The big changes in training when you're going up to Ironman, because that is a different games. So we have already been in the lab and working much more on to try to find the right balance between the longer durations on the bike rides, especially on the run. They need to know how it is to run a marathon. They haven't done it before, so they will need to have some longer runs. But in general, I would say that I think we have quite good control on that, and our scientist Olav Alexander, he's paying a lot of attention to that with athletes. They actually finished the last day in the lab right now. Kristian is doing that, and Casper the same. Gustav is actually in US, so he's not doing the lab, but he did it before he raced the Collins Cup. So we have a lot of good data to work on. So we have quite in control of what we should do. So as I said, on short term for 70.3, no big changes, quite easy to adapt. A little bit more specific for the Ironman racing, but we have good ideas, we have good data, good numbers, so we are very certain that is something the athletes can manage really well. And when they will race, if it's Ironman Hawaii who is the first race, or if it will be one race before, they will be up there, and they should be performing at the level that will fight for the win. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt. And I mean, as you mentioned already, the way that you train normally is set up to as well be a really, really good way to train for long distance racing. Is building that aerobic base and everything. And the volume that you're doing is as high or higher than most long distance athletes do. So yeah, I think that there's no doubt that they will be very competitive on whatever distance it is they're doing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Arild, this has been absolutely wonderful. Is there anything else that you have on your mind? Anything else that you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
I think we have a good conversations. A lot of things we've been talking through, and you also mentioned it. Some of our general principles about training. I think I've been talking about earlier in podcast with you. So I think I think we covered most of it now. And as always, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Same to you, Arild. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye bye. Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview with Arild. It was, of course, Arild's third appearance on That Triathlon Show, and he's somebody that I always love talking with, and I know that most of our listeners do as well. Just looking at the download numbers of his previous episodes showed that without any doubt. I will link in the episode description and the show notes to Arild's previous appearances, as well as the interview I did with Olav Alexander, who is the sports scientist on the Norwegian team. All of those episodes would be really interesting for you to listen to if you enjoyed this one and you haven't heard them before. Now, I also want to mention the Scientific Triathlon Training Camp of 2022 that we just announced a week or so ago. The training camp will take place on Mallorca from the 27th of March to the 1st of April. And as I mentioned last week, this training camp will not be about just going somewhere warm and training as much as you can and then having to rest for 2 weeks after because you trained way too much. But we will be there and help you train smart while you're away on the training camp so that you actually benefit from it long term and don't overtrain yourself over the week and then have to recover from it when you get home. We will help each individual adapt the week to their goals, and you will get help not just on the training perspective, but also get feedback and advice on technical aspects like video analysis on the swim, advice on your biking and so on and so forth. Even you can talk about your race strategies and we will help you with that. We basically want to just hang out with you for a week and help you train, but also help you learn as part of that training camp process. So go to scientifictriathlon.com and check out our training camp page there. You can find it on scientifictriathlon.com/camp and register your interest to make sure you get a slot, because we do expect this camp to sell out relatively quickly. And me and all of the other Scientific Triathlon coaches are looking forward to seeing you on Mallorca in March to April 2022. And on this podcast, I look forward to talking to you again next Monday when I interview Chris Myers about his new book called Triathlon Training with Power. So we'll go into training with power, not just on the bike, which is familiar to most, but also on the run, which is familiar to quite a few, and on the swim, which is a bit of a newer concept. But we'll talk about that in next week's episode. Finally, big thanks to our sponsors, Roka, that you can find on roka.com. Check out their wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, and high-performance eyeglasses and sunglasses, and get 20% off your entire order with the promo code that you can get on roka.com/TTS. And thank you to Zen8. Use the Zen8 indoor swim trainer to improve your technique, power, and stamina, and increase your swim stimulus frequency even when you can't get to the pool or open water. Get 20% off your order with the promo code that you can get on zen8swimtrainer.com/TTS. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.